So this is the title of my talk in English. I will be discussing skills, texts, and values that we need to nurture in the next generation readers. I want to start with this quote. I'll let you read it. So Harold Brodke is an American short story writer, and he talks about this really unique act that we perform when we read. It is this unique conversation we can have between two human minds. And that, of course, is quite difficult in the age of constant bombardment from social media, algorithms, fake news. So really the question is, how can we navigate this increasingly complex reading landscape? And for people on the ground, so to speak, so the teachers, authors, journalists, people who create content and who share content with students, young people, children, it is very difficult to know how to respond to this constantly moving target if we don't know what the key value is of reading. So I don't have quick magic bullets, but I have some suggestions, some recommendations based on the research that has been happening not only at the universities that I represent, but also other international organizations. I'll start by talking about the values, the important things that we mustn't forget as we are talking to young people about texts. Then I'll move to talk a little bit about design and then to skills that we would like to see in young readers. I want to start with values, and I want to challenge us all to not think about digital and print as two opposing forces, as two things that are in competition. In fact, that is an old question that is no longer supported by research. It can lead to some wrong assumptions, and it can shut down the important communication channel that digital texts serve. Instead of talking about print versus digital, e-books versus print books, we need to focus on the purpose of reading. Who is the reader? Why do they read? What is the content of the story or of the information that they are reading? What is the context in which they are reading? Is this at home? Is this at school? Is it in between? And the connections among these C's. And the last C, if you like, that we talk about in research is about the community here. The importance of all of us understanding that the landscape of reading is changing for all of us, not only the young people, but us, teachers, practitioners, researchers. I also want to highlight the added value of digital books because they are often not talked about in the positive sense. I want to highlight it not because they are superior, they are not, as we know. There is no print versus digital superiority, but I want to highlight them because not many people know that it is digital format that is very useful for children who struggle with reading. There have been studies with children who are at risk for learning disability, who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. For these children, to read on screen is the preferred way of reading. And that is why it is very important we don't perceive the digital as something negative, because we will be shutting down the road to read for these children. This is quite a complex model, but that is the model that we work towards as we are discussing digital texts. As you can see, there are many variables, many important bits of information we need to be mindful of as we are discussing what it is that is happening in reading. On top, you can see the different format characteristics, and this applies both to print books and e-books. What is the shape of the reading device or of the book, weight, colors, materials. In terms of content, of course, we want to make sure that the language that is being used is grammatically complex. There are many new and exciting words. Illustrations are of high quality. The narrative is of high quality. And then when it comes to digital books, we want to make sure that, again, the quality is high in terms of music, voiceovers, hotspots. Nowadays, a lot of AI algorithms and games. Now, all these features of the reading medium, they interact with the characteristics of the reader. As I said before, the reader's age, executive functioning, so how the reader approaches the text, what are their reading habits, which home do they come from. All this interacts with the different characteristics of the reading medium. You can read more about this in that open access article, because I realize it's quite a busy slide. But I want to move on and kind of conclude this first part by suggesting that we can engage future readers through choice and text diversity. And this is not some kind of lofty academic idea. This is something that is practically used in several projects. And I want to highlight two projects from Canada, the Multiliteracy Project or the Knowledge Building Project. Both of them are using multiplicity of texts because they realize that young people communicate in many different ways, not only writing by hand, but also writing digitally, producing content digitally, and that is what is being offered to them in the community of knowledge production. And these projects, when you go on their websites, you'll see that it is not about adding more time into the classroom. It is rather thinking how we can use the time we have available in a way that gives balance to these different reading formats. Now, with that clarified, that there is no dichotomy between the print and digital, I want to zoom in on the digital texts. Because as I said, they are not discussed so much, so I would like to share a little bit what we know from the different research studies that have been done. And if we simplify it a little bit, we can think of digital texts in two ways. They can either be static or they can be dynamic. If they are static, it means that they have been of the content, what is inside the book. If they are dynamic texts, they change as we are reading them. And what matters then is the journey, not the destination. With the first category, what we focus on is the quality of content and whether children understood the content, what did they learn from the content. With the other type, with the dynamic text, we are talking more about the reading strategies. What skills did children have as they were accessing these different texts? Did they ask some critical questions as they were reading through? Now, the static texts, that is very much where the current educational focus is. This is what we are teaching children in classrooms. As teachers, you select or recommend specific texts to them. If we read newspaper articles, we are given the final story. We are not given the different sources, how the story was produced. If you think about algorithms, it's the same. We are not given the different sources. We very much get the final product. So reduction of different contents into one high-quality piece. And then what is the main concern to teachers, and of course to us, researchers, educational professionals, is whether children really understood the content, or did they just skim it and didn't engage with it? Did they reflect on the story? Did they think hard about what is being said here? Or did they just, very shallowly engaged with it? And the current scientific understanding is that the difference between skimming and deep reading is not about the format. It is not the case that because I am reading something on my phone, it automatically means I will be skimming it. It is different if I am opening up a tweet, or if I am reading an important email, or if I'm reading a novel digitally. What matters is the mental representation of the reader. And what we mean by that is that as a reader, you build a model of what to expect in the text. You have some expectations, you have some perceptions, some beliefs of what is coming, and that is what influences whether you skim or whether you deeply engaged with it. And this mental representation works in conjunction, it works together with the text characteristics. So the format and the individual reader, they work together. Remember the C's I said a while ago, the content, context, the individual child coming together. This is why it's complex. This is why if we allow for the complexity to come in, we don't see it as print versus digital, but we start to understand that there are more factors that play a part. Now, having said that, there are some digital texts that are designed in a way that they force readers to engage quickly, to respond on an impulse, to engage in the so-called reward behavior. So you tap something and immediately you get back a notification, an emoticon. And this is not just a problem of digital texts. This is part of the wider digital landscape. So digital media, social media being designed in a way that is not helpful for deep engagement. And the counter movement coming from Silicon Valley as well as the other type of movement is the so-called slow design. So a philosophy where there are purposeful techniques to slow readers down. And the current technique that you may have seen are these different time indicators. So when you go online on popular blogging sites, you may have seen some of these indicators of how many minutes it takes to read a specific text, or as you are reading, you get a little clock that is telling you how well you are doing, and do you want to take a pause, a break, where are you on this progress bar. We feel quite ambivalent about this, and when I say we mean researchers. In a sense, it's a very reactive way of responding to the problem of not deeply engaging with texts. It might give some sense of accomplishment to readers, but it is not based on research. What is based on research is to introduce some gaps and pauses in the text that encourage reflection and dialogue. And if there are some designers or developers of digital texts in the audience, they might be familiar with these different techniques, but they do apply also to producers of print texts. In fact, many of these techniques have been used for many, many years before. We are now recognizing how important they are and introducing them into digital texts as well. And you see, having some empty spaces between illustrations and text, or some pauses and silences in the voiceover, these are the techniques that actually bring us back to the Brodkis quote at the beginning. You know, they are not about how quickly you read the text. Is it 5 minutes or 6 minutes? They are about having this dialogue between the author and you as a reader, this intimate act of communication. So as teachers, when you're evaluating whether this digital book is suitable, think about these important moments of silence. And if they are not in the digital text, you can always pause the voice recording, or you can always introduce them yourselves as well. The second technique I want to highlight is about personalization. And this refers to giving readers choice and control. It doesn't mean that we give children free choice and you can choose whatever you like. It is about curated choice. Curated choice means that either the author or the teacher has thought about some options, and within those options, young readers have a choice. You see the difference? So it's not about just providing a specific content, but within a specific realm, a specific group of different books, different types of texts, young readers make their choices. I mentioned that many of these techniques are old techniques. The first one, about addressing readers directly with the you question, what would you do? Will you turn the next page? This is something that authors know works very well for engaging young readers. They feel that they are part of the story, they are more motivated to read on. Interactive stories, again, this is not only about the digital. We know with Choose Your Own Adventure books, children are given the choice of choosing their own adventures within the constrained world of adventures. And the third one, that is about adaptive reading, that is uniquely digital. That is about the dynamic texts that collect personal data as children are reading, and they're dynamically adapting the text. Now, in the small blue font, you can see some of the research labs that use these different techniques and look at their benefits for engaging young readers. I'll move on to the third type, the dynamic texts and skills that we can encourage in young children. So I mentioned that dynamic texts are about the journey rather than the destination, and that what we need to nurture are these different reading strategies. And here I want us to pause and reflect a little bit on the importance of the web as a resource for engaging with dynamic texts. In fact, the web is a dynamic text, and if used well, it can very much be a great source for encouraging young people to ask questions, to search for information, and to be curious. Because as you are searching the web, you need to gradually refine your questions. You need to make them more precise. And that is very much fostering reflection, curiosity, the skills we want to see in future generation of readers. The internet is a dynamic text. That means that the more we are using it in a good way, the better it becomes. So encouraging young readers, children, to use the internet well is extremely important as they are growing up today. These are the skills that are being nurtured in different research projects that work together with teachers. They are about these reading skills that we very much want young readers to have as they are navigating the online landscape. They need to know about how to search, how to interpret what they find. Is this a valid information? Is this a fact? Or is it some kind of story that came from who have you? They need to think critically about the text that they access. They need to know about the sources, how to find them, how to identify fact from fiction. So making hypotheses, anticipating the contents, these are highly valuable online reading skills. And again, they are not just in academia, they are being used in different projects with teachers. I want to give voice to 2 international projects. The first one is the iFuko project from Finland. In fact, I believe it's a collaboration between Finnish and Chilean universities, where they engaged with, these were 11 to 13-year-olds, who received some content via video, so video modeling of different online skills. And as you saw on the previous table, they are quite complicated and there are many. So it was useful for children to watch the videos, do the sort of modeling of skills you want to see, then moving to the next box of analyzing, so watching and rewatching the videos, thinking about how can I navigate this online information. The third step was about discussing, and that is where the teacher came in. The teachers were provided with manuals so that they could discuss these online reading strategies with children. Then they moved into practicing, so practicing those skills on real texts, not some kind of imaginary text, but really going online and jointly discussing what is it that I find, how can I interpret it, and then moving to reflection. And it's a cycle that repeats. Now, it doesn't surprise me that it was the use of videos that worked so well in this project, because it is no secret that many teachers don't feel confident enough in teaching these online reading strategies. And it is absolutely fine to take inspiration from the existing projects that exist, but also the existing research that we have, and that can inspire these different strategies. The intergenerational learning, that is the point that connects to this, I would say, gap between how much teachers are expected to know about the online environment and what young people bring. You may have seen this study back in January, I believe it was published, that showed that users of Facebook who are above the age of 65, so elderly users, they shared 7 times more fake news than the younger age group. And if you think about where is this amplification of online misinformation coming, and Europe having an aging population, this is a real concern. Now, I don't want to make sweeping statements about digital skills of an entire age group. It might well be that that age group is using Facebook more. But it is the case that we have a huge gap in using the online environment and having these critical online reading strategies. So I'm very inspired by intergenerational projects that position young people as mentors, as ambassadors of the right critical literacy we want to see. And if they work together with elderly people, they're actually learning so much from each other. These young people will become designers one day, it's very likely, and they need to create an internet that works for all of us. So it's absolutely essential that they start this intergenerational dialogue early on. So if you can, librarians or teachers, people on the ground, do bring into dialogue different generations when it comes to using the online space. That is kind of my third wish rather than recommendation, because I realized that this is very much dependent not only on your own possibilities, but also on the training possibilities, on the professional development that is available. And on that note, I would encourage you to have a look at this website, childrensdigitalbooks.com. It is an international collective of research and design in children's digital books. We launched it at the University of Stavanger with the aim of fostering a dialogue between practice, research, and design of digital texts for young people. Everything is open access. It's not restricted to any group. So if you want to contribute content or just use the content, please feel free to. So that was a lot of information and all in English so quickly. So I want to summarize my key takeaways from this talk today. First of all, I talked about the values that we need to nurture in the next generation of readers. It is extremely important that we don't demonize, we don't perceive in negative colors the digital format. In fact, if we do that, we shut down the channel of communication with young people. We should instead approach the digital format as an opportunity to provide positive use, to provide mentorship, and to connect, not to control, but to connect with young people. There is no dichotomy. Print and digital are both here to stay. Both are equally important. About the texts, if we think about reading as an intimate act between two human minds, a unique conversation that we can all have, it is important that all texts give us, readers, some space for reflection. It can be achieved through clever design, and I mentioned some gaps and pauses that you can have, or it can be achieved through personalization, where you give readers choice to be part of the dialogue, actively be part of it. And it follows that the skills that we need to nurture in the next generation of readers are skills that are not only about the quality of the final content, but also the journey that takes you to this content. Young readers need to be able to ask critical questions about who is the author, why is this information presented to me, why is this in this format, do I like this format, what is the context of my reading, what is the content that I'm accessing. They need to be engaging with these C questions as much as we are as researchers or you as practitioners. So that's it from me. I'm here all day, very happy to take any questions or provide references, engage in dialogue. Or if you wish, please contact me via my email address or join the international collective that we have at the University of Stavanger. Thank you very much.
Tusen takk.